welcome back to the Bitcoin Season 2 pod. I'm your host, Charlie Spears with Blockspace Media. Bitcoin Season 2 is about new ideas, new conversations on Bitcoin. It's the technical and cultural smashed together for an exciting era of new topics on the oldest blockchain. Bitcoin Season 2 is produced by Blockspace Media, an independent B2B media company focused on the business of Bitcoin. Make sure to check out our other shows, the Mining Pod and the Gwart Show. Hit us on our website, blockspace.media, and find us on any podcast app, and definitely check out our YouTube channel. Also, subscribe to our newsletter. It goes out Mondays and Fridays. We write about a lot of stuff, ordinals, mining, company acquisitions, Bitcoin technical discussion. So make sure you subscribe to that, blockspace.media/subscribe. So I've got the Oil and Sandshrew guys with me, Taggart and Cole. They dropped a pretty cool oil wallet announcement video a while back. And by the time this episode drops, they are rolling out their Sandshrew front end. So I'm going to bring them up here and we'll have a good conversation about what they're up to. Welcome, Taggart and Cole.
Really great to be here. That intro got me really hyped up.
Yeah, dude, I got the best free use bass lead music hook for the intro. So
that sounds absolutely fantastic. My girlfriend's like, "Oh, you're not doing the podcast anymore?" I'm like, "No, this is it."
So, give you a little bit of intro here. So, who are you guys? What is Oil and Sandshrew, and what were you guys doing 18 months ago before Ordinals dropped?
Yeah, so Alec and Cole, co-founders at Oil Corporation. We're building, our goal is to really build infrastructure to enable programmability and any new kind of emerging use case on the Bitcoin blockchain. Our backgrounds, 18 months ago, it's funny, 18 months ago, we both came from the Ethereum ecosystem. I was kind of a founding partner at the BitDAO product lab. So wide ranging of kind of ecosystem building around all the resources from the DAO to the venture fund to the exchange, and kind of coordinating how do we really invest in some of these emerging use cases from gaming and DeFi, et cetera, and building a team around it. So Cole and I, Cole was with me, my head of product creative direction. Worked on a ton of different projects together, and all pieces of the stack. 18 months ago, I had left and was taking time off and thinking, okay, now that we're in deep bear market, what are some of the structural issues with the Web3 stack that kind of limits this idea of a billion users using it, people thinking that not only is it profound, not only can you buy monkey JPEGs, but how is this profound, and how do you have this real fully integrated experience? So went through a ton of different ideas, from should we build a Web3 browser, should we build a hardware device, should we build a super app, should we build a thesis driven product lab and use some of kind of the ecosystem building concepts that we had before. And in January, when I saw Ordinals, all these thoughts around competition in my head were floating around, building a browser. Do I really want to compete with Brave and Chrome and Arc, and building a layer 2? Do I want to compete in that ecosystem? And I saw Ordinals, and it was one of those moments as an entrepreneur where I felt that tingly sensation of this is going to be much more massive than anyone really realizes right now. And the deeper we looked into a lot of the theory that's been sitting around on Bitcoin for the past decade, really a lot of the infrastructure that was built was meant for a very different use case, buy, send, receive, and payments. And so seeing builder, energy come back up and figuring out, okay, we have PSBTs, and now there's a new lens with ordinals and assets on chain. There really is kind of this movement where I think on the Bitcoin side, a lot of people were fading it. Obviously, on the Ethereum side, both from investors and builders, have been looking at things like Lightning or DeFi attempts on Bitcoin, and kind of looked at it this is really isn't possible, and it's not cool. And so Oil kind of started with this thought of how do we go support some of the builders in the space that are kind of innovating on some of this new infrastructure. And the deeper we looked into it, we just thought we need to get all the best people we work with together and just go build this company on our own. So that's kind of the background.
Yeah, and you've worked with Cole for a while. Cole, what's your story? How'd you get here? And I understand you guys have assembled a decently stacked team already this early into Ordinals. Can you tell me about that? And what were you doing, Cole, 18 months ago?
Yeah, so about 18 months ago, I was deep into running my design agency With Pleasure, which famously has no website, referral and invite only. And I was servicing a bunch of clients throughout the DeFi ecosystem. So, on top of working with like WindRanger through BitDAO and Mantle ecosystem, it was Candyland out there at that time. Like it was crazy projects. I was charging crazy rates. And I was just mashing on like 6 clients at a time. And it was absolutely crazy, heads down. And so I'd kept in contact with Alec the entire time because he's the guy who brought me on and sort of really empowered me to take the reins at WindRanger. And like we also just got along as friends. And so like every few weeks, we would like every few days, really, like just every single day, like whether it's voice messages about this new NFT collection or like some cool thing that happened in Puerto Rico or, rotating through a couple different ideas. And it's like, oh, we got to get on the dock on this one. Let's actually jam on it. And I'm like, okay, maybe at some point Alec will have something. I'll take him on as a client at the design agency. We'll kind of work together again. We'll see what's happening. And then during our birthdays, which are in February, right after Ordinals came out, Alec came to New York. And he pilled me on Ordinals. I mean, at first I saw it pop up in like a client Slack, and they were talking about like NFTs on Bitcoin. I'm like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life.
We all thought that, yeah.
But then I started to learn about like the rigor of the on-chain data availability, how it's like it's not just a pointer, it's truly inscribed on-chain. And like after servicing all these clients and quite frankly having quite a distaste for what I had seen happen in like the NFT ecosystem from like both the art and speculative side, I'm like, this actually is like the holy grail opportunity to like not only think about Ordinals and how we integrate these new meta protocols and standards that are flourishing on Bitcoin, but like think about this opportunity from like a broader ecosystem perspective. What does it really mean for Bitcoin? And like Bitcoin for the last 10 years, we see it as this like pet rock currency that like, goes up and down in your Coinbase wallet. And like, that's about it. Meanwhile, the maxis can't actually admit that they've been playing around on OpenSea and some of the layer 2s and enjoying NFTs the whole way. And so now Bitcoin is like a completely different thing. You have this thing which is stored energy, calorie money times the social value of it, and now you have culture embedded on the blockchain. And so it begins to represent something completely different. It's now like the shared values of humanity imprinted in this one thing, which is the most rigorous security method and database that's ever been designed. So like as like thinking like a creative director, the rebranding opportunity for embracing this like this older thing that came up and has an orange logo proposed by a random person on a forum, but like creating a true product company and experience around what that ecosystem trajectory could lead to, which is DeFi on Bitcoin, true the best reserve asset, playing with all of your things. Is exactly what I'm in it for.
Yeah, and so you guys found yourself concepting. I remember early on you were saying we're working on this wallet, this Ordinals of our wallet called Oyl, OYL. And it's interesting because I think a lot of people thought, oh yeah, we just need a wallet that works with Ordinals. But then, especially in new ecosystems, you find like you want to build a product, and then you realize in order to build that product, you actually have to use other tools, which themselves don't exist. And so then the building of the tools becomes a product in of itself. And I'm imagining that's a lot of how Sandshrew came about to be. I'm gonna start calling you Alec instead of Taggart now. Alec, can you talk to me through like the process to go from Oyl to focusing on Sandshrew, and now when this releases, announcing Sandshrew's public access?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I think for us, we're like, okay, to your point, wallets are, have the core relationship with users and have the benefit of working with developers that can both market and build experiences for different types of users to kind of bring them into where you really own that relationship and you get, great feedback loop of information from developer to consumer back and forth. And so we, Cole has, had this vision for what the wallet should become, the deeper we look into how do we make this possible, the infrastructure just wasn't there. And so a lot of how we think about oil itself is like a greater company. Is it like, how do we build the necessary tools, flashlights, and infrastructure to really enable everything from as close to the bare metal as possible to the human experience? And so a lot of the wallets or experiences in other ecosystems, I think really still is not that great. I think that when they were built, it was built with this idea of NFTs, collectibles will be a thing. People will swap and trade on Ethereum or the other ecosystems without really having kind of a user base. And so I think that now we have the benefit of looking back over the past 5 years and saying, okay, where does the consumer demand come from? Where are kind of some of the pieces that make it difficult to use? And where does some of the risk lie? So the deeper we looked into building this experience of a wallet, which really at Oil, the initial wallet looks fairly familiar. And it's, parity of experience of what exists elsewhere with like maybe 3 to 5% difference, right? But at Oil, we really want to redefine the wallet itself. And the only way to really do that and make things composable and modular, to expand the surface area where people can kind of go develop and build applications, we really had to think about this from scratch. And so loosely, you can think about the things that we built now. You think about Sandshrew. And if you go and tie that to other products and something like Ethereum, it's kind of like a bundling of Infura or a great like data and RPC product with something like the graph, which allows you to build indexes and graph and scaffold them and distribute them to your end users or developers. And so the combination of those two products, like Metashrew, the indexing product, it's a WASM runtime. We built an open source framework for that, but we do the orchestration through the Sandshrew system. So anybody that creates an index, whether it's Rune's BRC20 or something that exists, or they're updating it, or they're forking it, building something else, or things like the BRC20 programmability layer, or building a swap product, immediately people can scaffold that. You can see, verify things on state, make changes. But the beauty is that because we have built the wallet on top of this infrastructure, both of them have kind of informed each other in terms of what the experience is. And so, we're really excited to see a lot of the virtues that have come from other ecosystems like composable open source frameworks to really increase the velocity of both experimentation and competition in the space as well, and provide the toolkit that gives the visibility of actually what's happening on chain, not just with what's happening in the mempool with UTXOs and transactions, but also combining that with rich, index data to really have activity-based information about what's happening on chain. And so really like it started with the wallet, but really when you think about Oil, it's an infrastructure business, and think about the wallet as the first artistic expression of what can be built with our toolkit. So yeah, that's kind of like the journey that we've taken. And so it's obviously taken much longer than we expected. I think Cole has, an almost perfect expectation of what can be built. And we definitely, take, there's some features that probably aren't as good as other wallets, but I think like the core features that are most important are going to be, ideally, paradigm changing in terms of how people think about what can be done on Bitcoin.
Yeah, I'll throw a question to Cole. So if we're talking like, whenever we have one of these like new ecosystems pop up with different, it has similar incentive structures in some ways, but it has very different like mechanisms. It's not even clear to me how the Ordinals ecosystem should be represented in a wallet interface. Can you talk to me about some of like maybe what goes through your head when you're designing how a user interacts with an inscription? Like how do you communicate like where it is, how it fits into the wallet? Like where's your head go? How do you think about this?
Totally. That's a great question. So like a lot of design and where we started with the company was like thinking about what's the experience we want to offer for Bitcoin users. So that's user experience. And then, how do you express that in the interface using visual application methods? Like that's user interface. And so like they're both two different tools which are applying abstractions to different things. The UX is providing an abstraction to the technologies. Like the technologies of, cool, I can send, I can receive, I can do these things, I can connect to this dApp. How are you guiding a user through that in terms of, what type of information are you presenting? And then like the interface is, you can have infinite ways to render an interface around a given UX. I can say I want the UX to make it easy, fast, simple. The interface doesn't solve for itself even at that point. And so like it's really important to understand like what are the mental models that are helpful for users that connects to other ecosystems? What are the mental models that we can create that are new ones that are going to be really stable in the trajectory of the paradigm that we know we're chasing into? And so like one example is like we think about, okay, well, we have this wallet. Lots of people, they go on Unisat wallet, they see the list of derivation paths, they freak out a little bit, they kind of figure it out, okay, I'll choose Taproot and I'm going. And then they try to send Bitcoin from their centralized exchange, and they can't because the Coinbase or whatever centralized exchange, they don't recognize Taproot addresses. So when you understand this current inflection point in the ecosystem, there are two paths. You could say, no, I want to be Taproot only. These are Taproot assets. Let's do Taproot. But if you truly think about what the steps are for the intended UX, which is you want a easy onboarding for existing users that own Bitcoin, you need to accommodate that by having a SegWit address in the wallet. And so like each of these things spiral out into like, now think about the trajectory of Taproot and SegWit. Well, that actually gives you a lot of benefits. If I want to make sure that I'm not spending my inscriptions, we have this so that it preferences paying fees from SegWit. And like there are lots of protections you can kind of build in if you understand which abstractions you're introducing and how they're going to play out. So like, let's say we're navigating the Bitcoin ecosystem. I mean, the first time I came in, I was looking at inscriptions on Unisat and OKX and some of the older exchanges. But those are the two main ones where most of the liquidity is now. And even to this day, they set up this very strange UX pattern, which is, Domo created BRC20s, which is JSON on inscriptions. And so they render as inscriptions, which means they look like NFTs with JSON written onto it. And you're like, okay, what is this? I want to buy some of these BRC20s. Well, here's one for $3. Here's three for $6. And you're seeing all these individual tranches. And it's like, what am I doing here? Like, I am used to Uniswap. I go to I'm getting a quote against the liquidity pool. I put in how much I want, and it gives me a quote. Like, why is it not like this? And so then you see that like this pattern, because of the limitations of BRC20s, has been repeated in the marketplace over and over and over and over again. And that's the kind of same thing that you see happen with liquidity pools and swapping interfaces in Ethereum. You see Uniswap did the block, and then everybody does a swap block. And then you see these other, like, what would a wallet do when there's 20 different swap providers? Well, you think about a 1inch, you think about Rainbow, you think like they're going to create a routing mechanism that aggregates all these marketplaces. And so if I'm a new user coming into Bitcoin, I just found out, oh, this BRC20 is something cool, I want to buy it. This Ordinal is something cool, I want to buy it. Okay, where do I go now? Which marketplace? How do I find the best price? How do I connect to it? Does my wallet connect to it? I have Bitcoin on SegWit. He has Bitcoin. It only picks up my balance if I have it on Taproot. I can't batch sign because this wallet can only do certain things. And you're like,
I need to go sell my pups token, and I need to switch my wallet. And
you're speed running just all the questions that my Discord is populated with, unanswered questions of that type. I feel you guys here.
Yeah. So that's I mean that was just a high level overview, but can get more specific into any of those flows. But it's like,
but I think too, like some of the problems with building a wallet and some of this infrastructure as new paradigms and primitives are being explored. It's like one of the problems is like, we want to have the venue where, we can really do order matching and have kind of the best price execution in a UX that makes sense. Like I want this many units, or I want to sell this much Bitcoin, and, make things work. And so when you have this, current PSBT kind of paradigm where it's mostly, on the buy side, and there's not sell side liquidity, we're kind of thinking, okay, what's it going to take for pooling or other experiments to happen? And so what we're seeing is that there's different levels of complexity, whether people are trying that purely on the indexing layer, trying it through a layer 2 mechanism, through a bridge, some hybrid combination of EVM and Bitcoin. And so really it's like we've built this really great intent engine that allows us to pull in different types of liquidity and just abstract it to the user of, this is how many units that I want. And this is the protocol that I want to purchase from, whether it's Ord or Runes or BRC20 or others that kind of populate. So a lot of it is like having to really imagine where is the ecosystem going and what tools are, what's it going to take to kind of get there. And so like looking across other ecosystems, like it's obvious that a lot of this really spurred when there is kind of open source composable competition. And somebody comes out to Cole's point with something else, but if there's visibility in it, you can go do it and fork it and change it, and you can verify the state of those things, then competition kind of emerges. And so it's really like, we started thinking about, maybe we create an open order book that is a new standard for PSBTs that works in a way that works more like a traditional order book that has both sell and buy side. And then you kind of find people that are experimenting in different ways, and that kind of informs the product that you build.
Yeah, and so one thing, I'm reading through the Sandshrew docs, and you guys talk about, you provide a lot of things, which again, JSON RPC, Block Explorer, and you talk about like Explora, or you're talking like how basically like designing how do you communicate the data, both metadata and just Bitcoin blockchain data. How do you communicate to the user? I haven't seen like where you guys or how you guys are thinking about this, but could you talk to me about both how you acquire and provide that data, and then how you're thinking about communicating that in an Explorer type setting?
Yep. I want to give you like a small background on like the where Sandshrew, like its origins. Obviously it's named after
A Pokemon.
Which is how you know that
it's constantly evolving, just like Bitcoin.
Yeah. But this was really spearheaded by our CTO Ray. And in the early days of this project, when I was just silent thinking about Wallet World, I was like, I don't really know what this Sandshrew thing is. Like, I guess this is the back end for the wallet, But he was really processing and saw immediately, like, took this proactive approach. Like, there are going to be these indexer wars. There are going to be people are going to want to build more things here. Like, seeing how we were trying to develop on the wallet, he's like, there was like just some burning core. There's like, he knew like to unblock the Bitcoin ecosystem at large, like he knows what tools need to exist. And what he was trying to accommodate was like the ultimate compatibility with all these different language types, which is what led him to WASM. I mean, whether you're in Rust or C or C++, like it's all going to sort of compile there, and referencing some of these other compilers and information that like is honestly like way above my head technically. But that's what it came out of. Like it was Ray thinking about like, okay, how do we unblock this for the future so that people can create and do as much as possible on Bitcoin? And that becomes like, well, we need to have a good solid RPC. Like I want all of the data. Explorer has like an expanded set, and then thinking about how different indexes or like custom hosted indexes are going to be created and then hosted by that. So like now you have a situation where using Metashrew, you can defining your own WASM logic, create your own index, and then you can have it hosted by Sandshrew. So anyone who's using Sandshrew can now pull that data. And Oil, as the first flagship wallet built on top of Sandshrew, we get all of that data natively. So you paste your public hash in the wallet, and now the developer experience of building on Bitcoin is, well, I built this using this open source framework on Metashrew. It's hosted by Sandshrew. I can trust the data because I can validate that the state is what it says it is. Now I can pull that into a wallet. And like the development pathway is completely different. Like instead of having to go convince all the incumbent wallets that your new standard or meta protocol should be supported among their multi-year timeline and like other engineering efforts, it's like nearly untenable. Whereas, we want to unlock this on both sides so that people can experiment and lower the barrier of entry.
So I will say too, like, Sandshrew really is, very open source minded. And so a lot of the RPCs that we string together to get all this rich data are really building off of the shoulders of giants, right? It's these open source things like Electrum's peer-to-peer indexer, Explora, Bitcoin Core, and really putting this together in a way that's really easy to get this, nuclear reactor of methods. And then, the WASM runtime Metashrew is really taking Explora's peer-to-peer indexer and reconfiguring it to WASM. And so that, all this stuff is the orchestration layer happens through Sandshrew. And so to answer your question about like a block explorer, so one of the big problems right now, I think, is like if you go to any traditional Bitcoin block explorer, you see UTXO splits and transactions, and like from a user perspective, it's like, when did I buy this, this ordinal? How much Bitcoin did I pay for it? When things get more complex, like I swapped this, or I added LP, or I sent X amount of tokens, bundled like inscriptions together, which accumulates to 10,000 Ordi tokens. What actually happened? And so within, like, for us, like, we really want to expose these tools for people to build things like a deck screener or a block explorer that really makes sense. But one thing that we've done within the wallet, and this is some alpha here, is we have this really great transaction action feed within the wallet. And so it's a combination of all these different technologies and data sources plus the indexing, so that immediately, if you send an ordinal or BRC20 tokens or runes from a different wallet, whether it's Sparrow or Unisat or whatever, immediately when that information hits the mempool in your transaction feed, it says you're receiving this ordinal. Here's the picture. Here's the inscription ID. Here's the SAT number. And it has it all right there, where you're actually seeing the activity that you did and the intent that you made. And so that is like an extremely powerful tool just generally. But we hope that people see that and say, oh my God, I can actually go and use Sandshrew to go build something more robust and generalized that is something like an Etherscan or something like a deck screener or a really kind of rich data product.
Yeah, this is really fascinating. And it makes sense because there's very little that I see across the Ordinals ecosystem currently, which I would describe as accomplishing the intent-driven user experience. The whole Ordinal story to date has been one of users having intention and then having to peel everything back, and then maybe they will accomplish their intent after spending a lot of time asking questions. So actually, I want to go back to the developer experience that you mentioned, Cole, because I think that's core. A lot of people wonder, like, why has this not been built for Ordinals yet? And I think the answer is probably it's just because it's darn near impossible for developers to even make sense. They can't, you can be a front end or a cracked out front end dev, but you can't consume any data to build anything with it. So when it comes to, say, the Metashrew product and even designing a meta protocol, that you can be a great meta protocol designer, but you can never implement or serve that up. Can you talk to me a little bit more about the developer experience as it relates to launching and serving up data for these meta protocols?
Yeah, so right now, Metashrew is in like an early access mode. We have, Metashrew-ord and Metashrew-runes, which you guys should check out as reference implementations of these indexes, which you can find on GitHub. And right now, so it's basically like an early access flow. So if you would like to use Metashrew, the way that you do that is you go to sandshrew.io. At this point, it'll be launched, so it will be live. And you will see a place to get early access to Metashrew on the landing page. That's going to take you through a quick Typeform funnel, and that will link you up with an account manager on our side who's very deep into the DevOps and flows for onboarding into into Metashrew. Effectively, the flow looks something like this. You start out, you have to create a Sandshrew account. So there are multiple tiers for a Sandshrew account. There's a free tier, which you can get started with up to 100,000 calls, I believe, per day. I don't exactly remember the interval. I should know the pricing better. And the tiers move up as subscriptions up from that. If you are an enterprise or you're looking to have some sort of customizable data or want some sort of deal or partnership, we can also do a customized plan that way. And you go in and you create your first Sandshrew key. And the Sandshrew key is going to basically give you access to all of the things that Sandshrew natively serves via the RPC. And from that, you can then interact with Metashrew codebase, which is going to lay out all of the frameworks. I'm not extremely technical in terms of like what the individual steps are, but it will enable you to run Metashrew to define your own logic. And the ultimate output of that will be like some sort of table with like key value pairs. And those then we'll share API secret with that individual, and that will allow us to host it on Sandshrew, and then it'll appear within anyone who's a Sandshrew user will be able to pull it as an RPC. And the next wave is we are building out an entire product side for exploring and interaction with Metashrew within the Sandshrew product. So in the same way that the Sandshrew product has like a UI, you can create your keys, you can do billing management, things like that. The next step is unlocking that for Metashrew. And I think the first way to do this is really think about like the discovery experience. Like as you were talking about, like how do we let people even know that all these indices exist, that they can get these records and these key value pairs and they can analyze it and there's cool stuff there. Well, one problem with it now in its early access form is, it's kind of nested. Like you have to be in the console interacting with it in order to like discover these things and pull the methods. Of course, we can always copy the public key and like the hash and, they can discover it. But I think like, just like we discover tokens in like these grids on DexScreener or on CoinMarketCap, it's like, these are them ranked. This is all the stuff. I'm going to create the same exact product funnel for exploring hosted indexes. So you'll go into Sandshrew, and then you'll click on the Metashrew tab, and you'll see, oh, there's Ord, there's BRC20, there's Runes. Here's this other one that someone made and listed. Here are all the other ones. Maybe there's some more practical things like trade tables or wallets that people are watching, or any type of mechanics. Like they might not all be meta protocols, so to speak. There are many valuable things you could do with a customized data index, using these as other indices as inputs, or forking them and doing your own thing. But that's sort of where it's going. And so at the point that Metashrew fully launches, where that product portal is there, it'll all be self-service. You'll be able to see all of the stats, how many calls people are making from your RVC, all the data related to that. You'll be able to put a description and name it and sort of brand it, and people will be able to discover and hit it. And then I'm thinking I might even put that discovery flow in the public side in the landing page. So you don't even have to create an account in order to explore all the data from the indices that it's serving. You will need one to obviously to pull it as an RPC, but you'll be able to see all these things that you didn't currently know were associated with layer one Bitcoin mainnet.
But yeah, Charlie, to your point, like we've in our working with L1F and looking at all the problems with creating BRC20. Really, we thought about what's the life cycle of both building one. And so when I think about the user types for Sandshrew, it's, consumers of data, and then there's, people that want to distribute their data. So the amazing thing is, if you think like from the perspective of the, correlation between the wallet and someone building an index or a meta protocol or some utility, is they write their program in assembly script or Rust. It syncs. We do the orchestration immediately when it syncs. They could go put that meta protocol hash into a wallet or a block explorer, immediately get the data. So immediately when it syncs, you see, here's the assets. Here's this new meta protocol. Here's the assets that exist. Immediately it's like, okay, within the wallet, maybe at some point we have the ability across all the indexes that are stored there to see what's minting out, what's being etched, what's being inscribed. And just like you're buying something in a swap block or a buy flow, you can find that asset and purchase it, all within the wallet without having to go to all these different places. And so it really creates this paradigm shift for not only current meta protocol developers in terms of maintaining what they're doing and distributing it to every network, participant and every developer, but also it allows new people to really punch above their weight, right? So instead of having to beg, barter, steal, create something closed source, get people to use it, beg a wallet or exchange to put it in, it's like it just is available. You just hit this data and it exists and you can get it.
Yeah, I see this like leveling up the entire landscape of meta protocols on Bitcoin, which have been this very haphazard, chaotic. It's been the most chaotic thing I've ever seen, and it's created a lot of like ecosystem friction too. Like, you mentioned the indexer wars. Like, maybe I assume like crypto generally is always going to be kind of this adversarial thing, as it grows and works out the growing pains. But like this would reduce a lot of the friction to distribute these things to market.
Yeah, and it also kind of blows it up too. I think a lot of people that are kind of building these initial protocols are like, okay, like I built this, I'm going to go build a moat around this index in my marketplace and my wallet or whatever it is. And so, people are having to really go figure out how to get this data and make a line somewhere. But this kind of allows you to say, here's what is possible. I'm going to go and change this a little bit or fork something, or here's something that worked. And that's going to happen 1,000 times, but that really helps us all kind of move forward. Like there's enough friction to where, you have rocks tumbling around in a tumbler, but this kind of allows for, I think, a lot of polish and a lot of like really the true, use cases to shine through and the things move forward.
Yeah, if you've got a moat keeping other people out, maybe that moat could turn into something that encircles you. It's the story I think of Bitcoin and most of these like open networks has been the more like open the data, the more accessible and innovative the ecosystem on top of it.
Yep.
So yeah. So to kind of wrap this up, what do you guys like envision? What do you hope to see happening in the Ordinals and Bitcoin data space over the next several years? And how does Oil Sandshrew kind of fit into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the short term, it's really like some of the obvious stuff. Like I think, exchanges and, folks like CoinMarketCap being able to actually, and investors and the general public being able to actually have a place where you can go, even if there's some level of complexity to understanding how Bitcoin works, being able to go and see this is what is actually happening. And seeing a lot of kind of these data analysts that have been working in other ecosystems like Dune Warriors, et cetera, people kind of searching what's actually happening on chain and really being able to kind of explore on-chain activity. But I think what this enables in the future is, larger, things like real-world assets and the world at large really adopting this in a way where, okay, like this actually makes sense and this is malleable. So I don't know, Cole probably has, something crazier that he can imagine in his mind, but yeah.
Yeah, where do you hope to see this ecosystem go, Cole?
I'm not sure where I hope to see it go, but I think Bitcoin is the most radical thing on the internet, and like only humans could have created it, and only we can steward what this is going to become. And it's like I'm bullish on it growing, obviously. The only risk I ever think was some sort of quantum event like messing it up. But even when you play out those strategies, it's like there might be some more sophisticated way to cut over using some sort of data product. And so like the continued investment in understanding what's happening on chain and creating relationships with users, whether that's from like a developer perspective or from a consumer perspective, or like at large, like what is Bitcoin as a brand? How do people think about it? I think like just seeing that evolve beyond, what we've seen with, traditional fiat currencies and how people start to think about their investment and their time, like Bitcoiners think about it very differently. I'm excited to see like where that goes, but I couldn't plot a trajectory. I mean, like if we're not all eaten by AI in the next 15 years, like maybe there will be something for Bitcoin. I imagine there will be AI agents looking for the stickiest set of APIs and infrastructure to settle on for Bitcoin. And if Oil and Sandshrew are not positioned as the stickiest and accessible ones to the AI superminds, like we will have failed.
That's a really good take. It feels like we all realize that there's a great voyage, so we're loading up the ships and just setting sail. We don't know how far it is, but we're going, baby. We're headed off. So I really enjoyed this conversation, you guys. Where can we find you, listeners of this? Where do they go to check out your products and what you are building?
Yeah, so we have Oil Wallets at Oil Wallets. That is our new Twitter handle or x.com handle, and then Sandshrew RPC. So the products the handles match the products, and then we are going to sort of formalize this brand architecture with a third Twitter profile, which will be at Oil Dynamics, and that will be the container. Think of like consensus family top level brands that is taking ownership for both Oil Wallet and Sandshrew as products and future products which may be in the works.
Great. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I look forward to following the future of Bitcoin data, meta protocols, and user flow and design architecture over the next several years. Maybe we'll have a catch up in a year and see what's happened over the previous 365 days.
That would be wild.
Let's do it. All right,
Thank
Charlie.
you guys.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for watching Bitcoin Season 2, wherever podcasts stream, and Blockspace.media. Hit our newsletter and YouTube channel. Otherwise, catch you later.